I think a lot of things I got wrong, people missed. They still don't understand that I got them wrong.
Like what?
I forgot.
The nation's capital narrowly averted a financial crisis this past week. And the man who steered the world's greatest economy for nearly 2 decades was worried. As chairman of the Federal Reserve for 18 years, Alan Greenspan worked with Presidents Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Reagan. But then came 2008. The housing bubble burst, Lehman Brothers collapsed, the stock market plunged.
People were blaming you for what happened.
How do I feel?
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
The fear that led to panic selling and the euphoria that inflated the housing bubble were not factored into the Federal Reserve's computer models. Greenspan himself believed irrational behavior could not be projected or analyzed.
I was wrong.
You think
Dr. Greenspan, I want to start with you. You were the longest-serving chairman of the Federal Reserve in history, and during this period of time, you were perhaps the leading proponent of deregulation of our financial markets. Certainly, you were the most influential voice for deregulation. You have been a staunch advocate for letting markets regulate themselves. And my question for you is simple. Were you wrong? Be sure the mic is turned on.
Partially, but
You said in your statement that you delivered, the whole intellectual edifice of modern risk management collapsed. You also said those of us who have looked at the self-interest lending institutions to protect shareholders' equity, myself especially, are in a state of shock disbelief, end quote. Now that sounds to me like you're saying that those who trusted the market to regulate itself, yourself included, made a serious mistake.
Well, I think that's true of some products, but not all.
Where do you think you made a mistake then?
I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of organizations, specifically banks and others, was such as that they were best capable of protecting their own shareholders and the equity in the firms. So the problem here is something which looked to be a very solid edifice and indeed a critical pillar to market competition and free markets did break down, and I think that, as I said, shocked me. I still do not fully understand why it happened, and obviously to the extent that I figure out where it happened and why, I will change my views. I mean, if the facts change, it will change.
The Princeton professor of economics who just won a Nobel Prize wrote a column in 2006 as a subprime mortgage crisis started to emerge. He said, if anyone is to blame for the current situation, is Mr. Greenspan, who poo-pooed warnings about an emerging bubble and did nothing to crack down on irresponsible lending, end quote. He obviously believes you deserve some of the blame for our current conditions. I'd like your perspective. Do you have any personal responsibility for the financial crisis?
Fairly major problems in predatory lending.
Well, he urged you to move with the power that you had as the chairman of the Fed, as both the Treasury Department and HUD suggested, that you put in place regulations that would curb these emerging abuses in subprime lending, but you didn't listen to the Treasury Department or Mr. Gramlich. Do you think that was a mistake on your part?
Well, I question the facts of that. He and I had a conversation. I said to him, I have my doubts as to whether they would be successful, and to eventually filter it into a subcommittee of the Federal Reserve Board.
Dr. Greenspan, I'm going to interrupt you. The question I have for you is, you had an ideology, you had a belief that that free, competitive, and this is your statement, I do have an ideology. My judgment is that free, competitive markets are by far the unrivaled way to organize economies. We've tried regulation, none meaningfully worked. That was your quote. You have the authority to prevent irresponsible lending practices that led to the subprime mortgage crisis. You were advised to do so by many others, and now our whole economy is paying its price. Do you feel that your ideology pushed you to make decisions that you wish you had not made?
Well, remember that what an ideology is a conceptual framework with the way people deal with reality. Everyone has one. You have to exist, you need an ideology. The question is whether it is accurate or not. And what I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. May I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in the reality.
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology, was not right. It was not working.
Precisely. No, that's precisely the reason I was shocked, because I've been going for 40 years or more with very considerable evidence that it was working exceptionally well. But just let me, I think the evidence very strongly supports that.
Well, I appreciate that. On the other hand, you didn't get to vote on regulations that you didn't put before the Federal Reserve Board, even though you had the legal authority for those regulations. That's more not a question but a comment.
Mr. Chairman.